Hello, friends and adventurers. I'm Em, and today we're going to talk about how to have your players respect combat without actually dying. Welcome to the DM table. So, in order to have your players respect that combat is serious, deadly often condition that can happen to them if they are uncareful with powerful enemies. Well, if you want them to know that this is a thing, that combat can be challenging, that it can be grueling, that it can be crippling and deadly, then I have some stuff for you. So, firstly, we want them to have somewhat pretty much accurate scouting reports from their abilities, from whatever they use, whoever they use to scout. You want them to have realistically accurate scouting reports. You want them to know that this is that much and that much dangerous, that much and that much deadly, has perhaps these and those abilities, like being a spellcaster or being that much accurate or powerful or what have you. They have their ability to assess enemies. Whichever class, skill, or ability they get this from, or whatever training they get this from, or whatever background they get this from, there should be some serious and reliable hints that explain what they're about to face, as long as they put in the time to scout a bit ahead without engaging yet, so that they can approximate what they're up against. And if they're not scouting and not thinking whether they should or shouldn't engage, then we should have, and indeed in any case, we should have consequences to combat. Of course, combat almost always has consequences, and we should prove this through injuries, through losses of equipment, through... Well, I always try to treat enemies on my table as a sort of a rattlesnake that's backed into a corner. If you are gonna be a party that's gonna pursue somebody to kill them, then, well, that creature or person will snap back and try to be as damaging, as repelling as possible. They'll try to do something to the party to dissuade them from trying to finish them off. They'll try to snap back and run away. They'll try to leave as much of a gash in the party's abilities, resources, health, lives, whatever, and they'll try to still get away and survive. And if you do this, well, players might complain, but they'll know that combat isn't a joke. They'll know that the other creature wants to survive and doesn't like being, well, killed off for reasons, especially if there's no reasons. So, you want that. Sometimes this ends up being in the form of some sort of poison that coats the blade of the opponent. Sometimes they have some bit of explosives. Sometimes, well, whatever it is, they might have something that they will use when they are feeling pressured, when they need to pull out all stops. Maybe they have some scroll or potion or oil or something like that that they wouldn't have used because it's expensive, it's valuable. They want to keep it for when it really matters, when they want to save their life, when they want to survive, when the time comes that they no longer think about the costs, they think about the survival. And these are the times. So, this is one way to prove that combat is indeed serious, by showing it off in your opponent's actions. But there are other ways to show that combat brings consequences. If they fight where they shouldn't, maybe they'll suffer some losses in their personnel. If they are leading an army or something, if they have some allies, they may lose one or two if they act rash and do things they shouldn't. Whoever is weak might get to suffer the consequences of going into tough, unreliable situations. Then, again, if they fight where they shouldn't, maybe they'll get some bounties on their head. Or maybe if they kill people that they shouldn't, they might get people that want to kill them in return. Maybe somebody's brother or sister wants vengeance. Who knows? If they do combat where they shouldn't, they probably should learn why they shouldn't. But it's important that they also have a hint, and a big hint, might I add, obvious hint why they shouldn't in most cases, if they shouldn't. They should know why something is bad idea, because their characters would know, so you want to narrate it to them how bad this would be. And then only if they act out of decision, not out of lack of information, then they can face the consequences of their decisions, not consequences of their accidental lack of knowledge that their characters should possess. After all, this is your opportunity to narrate and give more life to the campaign, so do so and help them help themselves, and not trample into some sort of situation where they shouldn't be, and what they shouldn't be doing and they shouldn't be experiencing. However, no thing needs to be absolutely lethal. Sometimes they end up in jail, sometimes they get trampled on the battlefield themselves, but they're not important enough to outright kill. Especially if it's a large battle, for example, there's too much carnage for everybody to stop and check whether they've finished off everybody, and that they would be doing that when they're fighting. As long as it's not a duel that is intently meant to be to eradication, there's no reason for enemies to act irrationally. They have reasons why they wouldn't want to kill off the party as well. They can have many such reasons. All the reasons the party might have. And even when combat should happen, even then, combat has costs. If you act tactically, if you give, as I said, good scouting information, good description of detections, good description generally, and yet combat is still tough, party will know that combat may have price attached to it, in resources, in situational advantages, in further importanter combat situations. If they want to deal with the whole dungeon, they might want to save their resources so that they don't want to be pressured into spending items that they would need to go out and buy, and that especially cost a lot of money or a lot of power to acquire. So if they engage riskily, they get to fight tough fights. And this is one way to also balance the difficulty of your combat in your campaign, by making combat more or less equivalent to what the players bring to the table, so that at the end they feel the pressure of, fighting and struggling against these forces that they've picked a fight with. And if this is all done well, now they have a pretty, I won't say realistic, but maybe even that. They'll certainly have immersive, deep, feelingful expression of combat and feeling of combat. And this is one of those nice things about tabletop. If you're gonna have combat, it might as well be something that is otherwise very hard to experience to that detail elsewhere. So, if you enjoyed this, if you thought this was unique or helpful, maybe you can spare me a click and I could see you here next or perhaps every week. And until then, I wish you luck in your adventures and to see you again soon.